So here we have the setup for changing concentration as a factor that affects the rate of a chemical reaction. In this case, the setup is that we have nitric acid that we are using to react with magnesium metal. We are using 4 different concentrations. (100% concentration of nitric acid, 75% concentration of nitric acid, 50% concentration of nitric acid, and 25% concentration of nitric acid. You need at least 4 different concentrations of the reactant, in this case the acid, to get excellence. A note that the magnesium ribbon is, as best as we could, the length of 1 centimetre, and what we've done to change the concentration of the acid is to change the volume of acid and added distilled water with it so that the acid is diluted. In this case, the ratios of acid in each different concentration is 45 millilitres of acid with 15 millilitres of water to create 60 millilitres of 75% concentration of nitric acid. Next, in a separate beaker, we are adding 30 millilitres of acid with 30 millilitres of distilled water for a total of 60 millilitres of 50% concentration of nitric acid. Lastly, we have 15 millilitres of acid added to 45 millilitres of water for a total of 60 millilitres of 25% concentration of acid. Now, to begin the first experiment, we need repeatable results. So what we're going to do is take a 100% solution of nitric acid and we are going to add 10 millilitres of 100% nitric acid to 3 different boiling tubes. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add a strip of magnesium metal to each of those test tubes and time how long it takes for the magnesium metal to react and no longer be visible. Now, as we have done in other experiments, we're going to wait in between adding the reactant magnesium metal to the acid, and then we're going to wait 30 seconds to add the second piece of magnesium to the same concentration of acid, and then we're going to wait another 30 seconds before we add the last and third magnesium metal to the third test tube. Now, a reminder, each of these 3 test tubes has 100% concentration of acid in it. So here we go. I'll just prepare 3 pieces of magnesium ribbon in my hand. There you go. And be prepared to turn on the time as I add the first strip of magnesium. And go. Now you may be able to see the reaction of the magnesium metal and the acid there. The bubbles that have been produced in the reaction between an acid and a metal is hydrogen gas, just as a reminder to you. It's coming up in 20 seconds In 8 more seconds I'll put the acid in there, and note the start time for the second reaction. There you go. And now we're going to wait another 30 seconds before we add the third piece of magnesium to the third test tube. So now we will have 3 sets of data running at the same time. Magnesium metal reacting with 100% nitric acid. And there we go. Now what I've done in the meantime is switched the test tubes so that they're now empty. And just to remind you, we have now done 100% acid reaction with 1 centimetre of magnesium ribbon 3 times. In order for us to now do the next concentration, 75%, I have already added 45 millilitres of the nitric acid, the original nitric acid, to 15 millilitres of distilled water, to a total of 60 millilitres into this 100 millilitre measuring cylinder. So now that I know that they have been put together, I'm now going to transfer them into the 75% acid beaker. Then what I'm going to do is I'm now going to measure 10 millilitres, just make sure they're well mixed, into a measuring cylinder 3 times. Again, making sure that I get down to eye level in order to double check the meniscus is at 10 mils. I do this 3 times and fill up the 3 new boiling tubes. So here I am transferring the first 10 millilitres of 75% concentration into the first test tube. So now I have 3 test tubes filled with 10 millilitres of 75% concentration of acid, and as a reminder, we got that by putting 45 millilitres of acid with 15 millilitres of water for a total of 60 millilitres of 75% acid. We then transferred 10 mils of that into 3 different test tubes, and all I'm going to do again is when I add my magnesium ribbon to the first boiling tube, I'm going to start the time. And you can see that the bubbling is reduced, there's less bubbling, therefore we still can confirm that magnesium ribbon is being produced, but probably less of it because there's less bubbles compared to 100%. We're now up to nearly 30 seconds for me to put, I'll take it to 35 seconds. So I'm going to make a note to myself for the second reaction at 75% concentration. I didn't add the magnesium ribbon in until 35 seconds, so you can change the time and whatever suits you. And I'm going to go back to a minute, so it'll be 0 seconds, 35 seconds and 60 seconds for the start times of the 3 different reactions. And now you can see that all 3 reactions are proceeding, and the end of the reaction is when there is no more production of hydrogen gas, because you won't see any more bubbles, which means that the magnesium has completely reacted with the 75% concentration of acid. Now, I'm not going to make a 50% and a 25% and show you how that works. I'm just going to remind you, in order to make 50% concentration of the acid, we put 30 mils of the acid, 30 mils of distilled water for a total volume of 60 mils, and then we would put 10 mils into 3 new separate boiling tubes, and then add more magnesium ribbon to each of those boiling tubes, and take the time for the reaction to be complete. We would then repeat that process for a 25% concentration of acid with 15 millilitres of acid added to 45 millilitres of water for a total of 60 millilitres total, and then put 10 millilitres of 25% acid into 3 new separate boiling tubes and add our magnesium ribbon again. A little technical error I made there, which I want to correct in case those people who are paying attention are paying attention. You add acid to water. So there, as a summary, we have 4 different concentrations of acid. The original concentration we're calling 100%. We then dilute that concentration of acid to 75%. We then dilute the original concentration of acid to 50%. We then dilute the original concentration of acid to 25%. We then use each of those different concentrations of acid to run 3 separate reactions, and we keep the second reactant magnesium metal ribbon length the same throughout, 1 centimetre.